This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. From the North American Review, November 16, 1906, Chapters from My Autobiography, by Mark Twain, Chapter 6. From Susy's Biography. Papa made arrangements to read at Vassar College the 1st of May, and I went with him. We went by way of New York City. Mama went with us to New York and stayed 2 days to do some shopping. We started Tuesday at 2:30 in the afternoon. We reached New York about 6:15. Papa went right up to General Grant's from the station, and Mama and I went to the Everett House. Aunt Clara came to supper with us up in our room. We and Aunt Clara were going to the theater right after supper, and we expected Papa to take us there and to come home as early as he could. But we got through dinner, and he didn't come, and Mama got more perplexed and worried. But at last we thought we would have to go without him. So we put on our things and started downstairs, but before we'd gotten half down we met Papa coming up with a great bunch of roses in his hand. He explained that the reason he was so late was that his watch stopped and he didn't notice, and kept thinking it an hour earlier than it really was. The roses he carried were some Colonel Fred Grant sent to Mama. We went to the theater and enjoyed Adonis (word illegible), acted very much. We reached home about 11:30 and went right to bed. Wednesday morning we got up rather late and had breakfast about 9:30. After breakfast Mama went out shopping, and Papa and I went to see Papa's agent about some business matters. After Papa had gotten through talking to Cousin Charlie Webster, Papa's agent, we went to get a friend of Papa's, Major Pond, to go and see a dog show with us. Then we went to see the dogs with Major Pond, and we had a delightful time seeing so many dogs together. When we got through seeing the dogs, Papa thought he would go and see General Grant, and I went with him. This was April 29, 1885. Papa went up into General Grant's room, and he took me with him. I felt greatly honored and delighted when Papa took me into General Grant's room and let me see the General and Colonel Grant, for General Grant is a man I shall be glad all my life that I have seen. Papa and General Grant had a long talk together, and Papa has written an account of his talk and visit with General Grant for me to put into his biography. Susy has inserted in this place that account of mine as follows. April 29, 1885. I called on General Grant and took Susy with me. The General was looking and feeling far better than he had looked or felt for some months. He had ventured to work again on his book that morning, the first time he had done any work for perhaps a month. This morning's work was his first attempt at dictating, and it was a thorough success, to his great delight. He had always said that it would be impossible for him to dictate anything, but I had said that he was noted for clearness of statement, and as a narrative was simply a statement of consecutive facts, he was consequently peculiarly qualified and equipped for dictation. This turned out to be true, for he had dictated 2 hours that morning to a shorthand writer, had never hesitated for words, had not repeated himself, and the manuscript, when finished, needed no revision. The 2 hours' work was an account of Appomattox, and this was such an extremely important feature that his book would necessarily have been severely lame without it. Therefore I had taken a shorthand writer there before to see if I could not get him to write at least a few lines about Appomattox. Note, I was his publisher. I was putting his personal memoirs to press at the time. S.L.C. But he was at that time not well enough to undertake it. I was aware that of all the 100 versions of Appomattox not one was really correct. Therefore I was extremely anxious that he should leave behind him the truth. His throat was not distressing him, and his voice was much better and stronger than usual. He was so delighted to have gotten Appomattox accomplished once more in his life, to have gotten the matter off his mind, that he was as talkative as his old self. He received Susy very pleasantly, and then fell to talking about certain matters which he hoped to be able to dictate next day, and he said in substance that, among other things, he wanted to settle, once for all, a question that had been bandied about from mouth to mouth and from newspaper to newspaper. That question was, with whom originated the idea of the march to the sea? Was it Grant's or was it Sherman's idea? Whether I or someone else, being anxious to get the important fact settled, asked him with whom the idea originated, I don't remember. But I remember his answer. I shall always remember his answer. General Grant said, "Neither of us originated the idea of Sherman's march to the sea. The enemy did it." He went on to say that the enemy, however, necessarily originated a great many of the plans that the general on the opposite side gets the credit for. At the same time that the enemy is doing that, he is laying open other moves which the opposing general sees and takes advantage of. In this case Sherman had a plan all thought out, of course. He meant to destroy the 2 remaining railroads in that part of the country, and that would finish up that region. But General Hood did not play the military part that he was expected to play. On the contrary, General Hood made a dive at Chattanooga. This left the march to the sea open to Sherman, and so, after sending part of his army to defend and hold what he had acquired in the Chattanooga region, he was perfectly free to proceed, with the rest of it, through Georgia. He saw the opportunity, and he would not have been fit for his place if he had not seized it. He wrote me, the general is speaking now, what his plan was, and I sent him word to go ahead. My staff were opposed to the movement. I think the general said they tried to persuade him to stop Sherman. The chief of his staff, the general said, even went so far as to go to Washington without the general's knowledge and get the ear of the authorities, and he succeeded in arousing their fears to such an extent that they telegraphed General Grant to stop Sherman. Then General Grant said, "Out of deference to the government, I telegraphed Sherman and stopped him 24 hours. And then, considering that that was deference enough to the government, I telegraphed him to go ahead again." I have not tried to give the general's language, but only the general idea of what he said. The thing that mainly struck me was his terse remark that the enemy originated the idea of the march to the sea. It struck me because it was so suggestive of the general's epigrammic fashion, saying a great deal in a single crisp sentence. This is my account, and signed Mark Twain. Susy resumes. After Papa and General Grant had had their talk, we went back to the hotel where Mama was, and Papa told Mama all about his interview with General Grant. Mama and I had a nice quiet afternoon together. That pair of devoted comrades were always shutting themselves up together when there was opportunity to have what Susy called a cozy time. From Susy's nursery days to the end of her life, she and her mother were close friends, intimate friends, passionate adorers of each other. Susy's was a beautiful mind, and it made her an interesting comrade, and with a fine mind she had a heart like her mother's. Susy never had an interest or an occupation which she was not glad to put aside for that something which was in all cases more precious to her, a visit with her mother. Susy died at the right time, the fortunate time of life, the happy age, 24 years. At 24 such a girl has seen the best of life, life as a happy dream. After that age the risks begin, responsibility comes, and with it the cares, the sorrows, and the inevitable tragedy. For her mother's sake I would have brought her back from the grave if I could, but I would not have done it for my own. From Susy's biography. Then Papa went to read in public. There were a great many authors that read, that Thursday afternoon, beside Papa. I would have liked to have gone and heard Papa read, but Papa said he was going to read in Vassar, just what he was planning to read in New York, so I stayed at home with Mama. The next day Mama planned to take the 4 o'clock car back to Hartford. We rose quite early that morning and went to the Vienna bakery and took breakfast there. From there we went to a German bookstore and bought some German books for Clara's birthday. Dear me, the power of association to snatch moldy dead memories out of their graves and make them walk. That remark about buying foreign books throws a sudden white glare upon the distant past, and I see the long stretch of a New York street with an unearthly vividness, and John Hay walking down it, grave and remorseful. I was walking down it, too, that morning, and I overtook Hay and asked him what the trouble was. He turned a lusterless eye upon me and said, "My case is beyond cure. In the most innocent way in the world I have committed a crime which will never be forgiven by the sufferers, for they will never believe. Oh, well, no, I was going to say they would never believe that I did the thing innocently. The truth is, they will know that I acted innocently, because they are rational people. But what of that? I never can look them in the face again, nor they me, perhaps. Hay was a young bachelor, and at that time was on the Tribune staff. He explained his trouble in these words, substantially: "When I was passing along here yesterday morning on my way downtown to the office, I stepped into a bookstore where I am acquainted, and asked if they had anything new from the other side. They handed me a French novel in the usual yellow paper cover, and I carried it away. I didn't even look at the title of it. It was for recreation reading, and I was on my way to work. I went mooning and dreaming along, and I think I hadn't gone more than 50 yards when I heard my name called. I stopped, and a private carriage drew up at the sidewalk, and I shook hands with the inmates, mother and young daughter, excellent people. They were on their way to the steamer to sail for Paris. The mother said, 'I saw that book in your hand, and I judged by the look of it that it was a French novel. Is it?' I said it was. She said, 'Do let me have it, so that my daughter can practice her French on it on the way over.' Of course I handed her the book, and we parted. 10 minutes ago I was passing that bookstore again, and I stepped in and fetched away another copy of that book. And here it is. Read the first page of it. That is enough. You will know what the rest is like. I think it must be the foulest book in the French language, one of the foulest, anyway. I would be ashamed to offer it to a harlot, but, oh dear, I gave it to that sweet young girl without shame. Take my advice. Don't give away a book until you have examined it." From Susy's Biography. Then Mama and I went to do some shopping, and Papa went to see General Grant. After we had finished doing our shopping, we went home to the hotel together. When we entered our room in the hotel, we saw on the table a vase full of exquisite red roses. Mama, who is very fond of flowers, exclaimed, "Oh, I wonder who could have sent them." We both looked at the card in the midst of the roses, and saw that it was written on in Papa's handwriting. It was written in German: "Liebes Geschenk an die Mama." I am sure I didn't say on. That is Susy's spelling, not mine. Also, I am sure I didn't spell geschenkt so liberally as all that. S-L-C. Mama was delighted. Papa came home and gave Mama her ticket, and after visiting a while with her went to see Major Pond, and Mama and I sat down to our lunch. After lunch most of our time was taken up with packing, and at about 3 o'clock we went to escort Mama to the train. We got on board the train with her and stayed with her about 5 minutes, and then we said good-bye to her, and the train started for Hartford. It was the first time I had ever been away from home without Mama in my life, although I was 13 years old. Papa and I drove back to the hotel and got Major Pond, and then went to see the Brooklyn Bridge. We went across it to Brooklyn on the cars, and then walked back across it from Brooklyn to New York. We enjoyed looking at the beautiful scenery, and we could see the bridge move under the intense heat of the sun. We had a perfectly delightful time, but were pretty tired when we got back to the hotel. The next morning we rose early, took our breakfast, and took an early train to Poughkeepsie. We had a very pleasant journey to Poughkeepsie. The Hudson was magnificent, shrouded with beautiful mist. When we arrived at Poughkeepsie it was raining quite hard, which fact greatly disappointed me, because I very much wanted to see the outside of the buildings of Vassar College, and as it rained that would be impossible. It was quite a long drive from the station to Vassar College, and Papa and I had a nice long time to discuss and laugh over German profanity. One of the German phrases Papa particularly enjoys is, "O heilige Maria, Mutter Jesus." Jean has a German nurse, and this was one of her phrases. There was a time when Jean exclaimed, "Ach Gott!" to every trifle, but when Mama found it out she was shocked and instantly put a stop to it. It brings that pretty little German girl vividly before me, a sweet and innocent and plump little creature with peachy cheeks, a clear-souled little maiden, and without offense, notwithstanding her profanities, and she was loaded to the eyebrows with them. She was a mere child. She was not 15 yet. She was just from Germany, and knew no English. She was always scattering her profanities around, and they were such a satisfaction to me that I never dreamed of such a thing as modifying her. For my own sake I had no disposition to tell on her. Indeed, I took pains to keep her from being found out. I told her to confine her religious exercises to the children's quarters, and urged her to remember that Mrs. Clemens was prejudiced against pieties on weekdays. To the children, the little maid's profanities sounded natural and proper and right, because they had been used to that kind of talk in Germany, and they attached no evil importance to it. It grieves me that I have forgotten those vigorous remarks. I long hoarded them in my memory as a treasure, but I remember one of them still because I heard it so many times. A trial of that little creature's life was the children's hair. She would tug and strain with her comb, accompanying her work with her misplaced pieties, and when finally she was through with her triple work she always fired up and exploded her thanks toward the sky, where they belonged, in this form: Gott sei Dank, ich bin fertig mit dem Gottverdammten Haar. I believe I am not quite brave enough to translate it. From Susy's Biography. We at length reached Vassar College, and she looked very finely, her buildings and her grounds being very beautiful. We went to the front doors and rang the bell. The young girl who came to the doors wished to know who we wanted to see. Evidently we were not expected. Papa told her who we wanted to see, and she showed us to the parlor. We waited, no one came, and waited, no one came. Still no one came. It was beginning to seem pretty awkward. "Oh, well, this is a pretty piece of business," Papa exclaimed. At length we heard footsteps coming down the long corridor, and Miss C., the lady who had invited Papa, came into the room. She greeted Papa very pleasantly, and they had a nice little chat together. Soon the lady principal also entered, and she was very pleasant and agreeable. She showed us to our rooms, and said she would send for us when dinner was ready. We went into our rooms, but we had nothing to do for half an hour except to watch the raindrops as they fell upon the window panes. At last we were called to dinner, and I went down without Papa, as he never eats anything in the middle of the day. I sat at the table with the lady principal, and enjoyed very much seeing all the young girls trooping into the dining room. After dinner I went around the college with the young ladies, and Papa stayed in his room and smoked. When it was supper time, Papa went down and ate supper with us, and we had a very delightful supper. After supper the young ladies went to their rooms to dress for the evening. Papa went to his room, and I went with the lady principal. At length the guests began to arrive, but Papa still remained in his room until called for. Papa read in the chapel. It was the first time I had ever heard him read in my life, that is, in public. When he came out onto the stage I remember the people behind me exclaimed, "Oh, how queer he is! Isn't he funny?" I thought Papa was very funny, although I did not think him queer. He read A Trying Situation, and The Golden Arm, a ghost story that he heard down South when he was a little boy. The Golden Arm Papa had told me before, but he had startled me so that I did not much wish to hear it again. But I had resolved this time to be prepared, and not to let myself be startled, but still Papa did, and very, very much. He startled the whole roomful of people, and they jumped as one man. The other story was also very funny and interesting, and I enjoyed the evening inexpressibly much. After Papa had finished reading we all went down to the collation in the dining room, and after that there was dancing and singing. Then the guests went away, and Papa and I went to bed. The next morning we rose early, took an early train for Hartford, and reached Hartford at 2:30. We were very glad to get back. How charitably she treats that ghastly experience! It is a dear and lovely disposition, and a most valuable one, that can brush away indignities and discourtesies, and seek and find the pleasanter features of an experience. Susy had that disposition, and it was one of the jewels of her character that had come to her straight from her mother. It is a feature that was left out of me at birth, and at 70 I have not yet acquired it. I did not go to Vassar College professionally, but as a guest and gratis. Aunt Clara, now Mrs. John B. Stanchfield, was a graduate of Vassar, and it was to please her that I inflicted that journey upon Susy and myself. The invitation had come to me from both the lady mentioned by Susy and the president of the college, a sour old saint who has probably been gathered to his fathers long ago, and I hope they enjoy him. I hope they value his society. I think I can get along without it, in either end of the next world. We arrived at the college in that soaking rain, and Susy has described, with just a suggestion of dissatisfaction, the sort of reception we got. Susy had to sit in her damp clothes half an hour while we waited in the parlor. Then she was taken to a fireless room and left to wait there again, as she has stated. I do not remember that President's name, and I am sorry. He did not put in an appearance until it was time for me to step upon the platform in front of that great garden of young and lovely blossoms. He caught up with me and advanced upon the platform with me, and was going to introduce me. I said in substance, "You have allowed me to get along without your help thus far, and if you will retire from the platform I will try to do the rest without it." I did not see him any more, but I detest his memory. Of course my resentment did not extend to the students, and so I had an unforgettable good time talking to them. And I think they had a good time, too, for they responded "as one man," to use Susy's unimprovable phrase. Girls are charming creatures. I shall have to be twice 70 years old before I change my mind as to that. I am to talk to a crowd of them this afternoon, students of Barnard College, the sexes annexed to Columbia University, and I think I shall have as pleasant a time with those lasses as I had with the Vassar girls 21 years ago. From Susy's Biography. I stopped in the middle of Mamma's early history to tell about our trip to Vassar because I was afraid I would forget about it. Now I will go on where I left off. Some time after Miss Emma Nye died, Papa took Mamma and little Langdon to Elmira for the summer. When in Elmira, Langdon began to fail, but I think Mamma did not know just what was the matter with him. I was the cause of the child's illness. His mother trusted him to my care, and I took him a long drive in an open barouche for an airing. It was a raw, cold morning, but he was well wrapped about with furs, and, in the hands of a careful person, no harm would have come to him. But I soon dropped into a reverie and forgot all about my charge. The furs fell away and exposed his bare legs. By and by the coachman noticed this, and I arranged the wraps again, but it was too late. The child was almost frozen. I hurried home with him. I was aghast at what I had done, and I feared the consequences. I have always felt shame for that treacherous morning's work, and have not allowed myself to think of it when I could help it. I doubt if I had the courage to make a confession at that time. I think it most likely that I have never confessed until now. From Susy's Biography. At last it was time for Papa to return to Hartford, and Langdon was real sick at that time, but still Mamma decided to go with him, thinking the journey might do him good. But after they reached Hartford he became very sick, and his trouble proved to be diphtheria. He died about a week after Mamma and Papa reached Hartford. He was buried by the side of Grandpa at Elmira, New York. Susy rests there with them. S.L.C. After that, Mamma became very, very ill, so ill that there seemed great danger of death, but with a great deal of good care she recovered. Some months afterward, Mamma and Papa, and Susy, who was perhaps 14 or 15 months old at the time, S.L.C., went to Europe and stayed for a time in Scotland and England. In Scotland, Mamma and Papa became very well acquainted with Dr. John Brown, the author of Rab and His Friends, and he met but was not so well acquainted with Mr. Charles Kingsley, Mr. Henry M. Stanley, Sir Thomas Hardy, grandson of the Captain Hardy to whom Nelson said, "Kiss me, Hardy," when dying on shipboard, Mr. Henry Irving, Robert Browning, Sir Charles Dilke, Mr. Charles Reade, Mr. William Black, Lord Houghton, Frank Buckland, Mr. Tom Hughes, Anthony Trollope, Tom Hood, son of the poet, and Mamma and Papa were quite well acquainted with Dr. MacDonald and family, and Papa met Harrison Ainsworth. I remember all these men very well indeed, except the last one. I do not recall Ainsworth. By my count, Susy mentions 14 men. They are all dead except Sir Charles Dilke. We met a great many other interesting people, among them Lewis Carroll, author of The Immortal Alice, but he was only interesting to look at, for he was the stillest and shyest full-grown man I have ever met except Uncle Remus. Dr. MacDonald and several other lively talkers were present, and the talk went briskly on for a couple of hours, but Carroll sat still all the while except that now and then he answered a question. His answers were brief. I do not remember that he elaborated any of them. At a dinner at Smalley's we met Herbert Spencer. At a large luncheon party at Lord Houghton's we met Sir Arthur Helps, who was a celebrity of world-wide fame at the time, but is quite forgotten now. Lord Elcho, a large vigorous man, sat at some distance down the table. He was talking earnestly about Godalming. It was a deep and flowing and unarticulated rumble, but I got the Godalming pretty clearly every time he broke free of the rumble, and as all the strength was on the first end of the word, it startled me every time, because it sounded so like swearing. In the middle of the luncheon Lady Houghton rose, remarked to the guests on her right and on her left in a matter-of-factly way, "Excuse me, I have an engagement," and without further ceremony she went off to meet it. This would have been doubtful etiquette in America. Lord Houghton told a number of delightful stories. He told them in French, and I lost nothing of them but the nubs. Mark Twain. To be continued. End of chapter 6.